At the making of this video, the Charlotte Hornets are currently like the 9th seed in the Eastern Conference. They have a 28-26 record. They haven't been amazing, but they also haven't been terrible. I think they've kind of been living up to the expectations we had for them at the beginning of the year, which was a fringe playoff team. Especially when you view how much injuries they have had, they have been living up to it. But in my opinion, I think the Charlotte Hornets are one of the more slept on teams in the Eastern Conference, and although they are a lower seed if they were to make the playoffs, I still think they're a team that can give the top teams in the conference troubles. And that has led me to make this video where I'll just be talking about how good the Charlotte Hornets have been this season and how good I think they can be. But before we get into the video, I ask you to drop a like on this video as it does help my channel grow. Subscribe to my channel if you want daily NBA content. Also, if you want to reach my goal of 3,000 subscribers. Also, drop a comment on this video as I do respond to all of my comments. And play that intro. The biggest thing that's a positive for the Hornets right now definitely has to be the fact that this is a roster that has many guys who can go off. They have many guys who can space the floor, many guys who can give you 20 points per game on any given night. That's truly what makes this team scary, because when you look at them overall on offense, they are pretty good as they're ranked 9th in the league, and this is like they're ranking that high with a significant amount of injuries. And when it comes to them actually scoring the ball, they're 2nd in the league in points per game. Honestly, it's not surprising to see them be that good. They just have so much scores on this team. First of all, they have LaMelo Ball, who did make the All-Star team this season. Congrats to him. He has been playing like an All-Star, averaging 19 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists on good efficiency. One of the best ball handlers in the league. Pretty good finisher, great at shooting. I think we all know how good LaMelo is. He can create his own shot. One of the most underrated scorers in the league. He's not at that elite level because he hasn't even averaged 20 points yet, but he's still a great scorer and draws a lot of attention from the defense. But low-key, Miles Bridges has broken out to be the 2nd best player on this team. He's definitely in the conversation for the most improved player award. Last season, he was just a really good role player. This season, I would say he's an all-star level guy. He's averaging 20 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, shooting 48% from the field while being one of the most and best versatile defenders in the league. He's been amazing, and he's a guy who could consistently give you 20 points because he's basically averaging that. He's a much improved shooter. Although his percentages are down right now, he's like way more confident when it comes to creating his own shot and things like that. And when it comes to attacking the rim and just playing off ball, Miles Bridges is phenomenal. He's been great this season, definitely in the conversation for most improved player. They also have Terry Rozier, who has been one of the most underrated players in the league. He's given them 18 points on good efficiency. He's a guy who can score at all 3 levels. He's a guy who can move off the ball, play on the ball. He's a guy who's going to take and make big shots. We've seen him hit countless big shots for the Hornets this season. I would say he's probably their most clutch player. He's definitely one of the most underrated players in the league. A lot of people were dissing his contract, and now it looks like he's like paid right as he should, or maybe even underpaid, because when you see other players like Luke Kennard making just as much money as him, maybe Terry Rozier is underpaid at this point. But he's a guy who gets absolutely no love from this team, even though I would say he's barely just not an all-star. He's on that level below that. The next guy I want to talk about is also underrated. This whole Charlotte team as a whole is just underrated outside of probably LaMelo and Bridges. But to talk about the guy who's underrated is Gordon Hayward. He's having an underrated type season. If he was like injured for most of the year, I would have understood why no one's giving him any type of credit for the Hornets' success. But he's been actually healthy this season. He's missed less than 7 games. He's actually given them 16 points on really good efficiency as a guy who could create his own shot at a solid level. Not as good as he used to, but he could still do it. He's a solid passer. He's just very underrated, and he's averaging like he can average 20 points on any given night. He just hasn't been as aggressive this season because a lot of the other guys have stepped up. Gordon Hayward is definitely a guy who can go off on any given night. He's a guy who the defense has to pay attention to. Definitely a good scorer on this team. We also have to talk about Kelly Oubre Jr., who has definitely been in the conversation for the 6th Man of the Year award. He's one of the best bench scorers in the league. I believe he had multiple games shooting, like making over 8 threes in a game. He has looked really good in Charlotte. He's looked way more confident. In the Warriors, he just looked hesitant, like he didn't know how to run their system. The Warriors system is very good, but not everyone can succeed in it, and Kelly Oubre definitely did it. He's been playing some of the best basketball of his year. He's averaging 17 points on really good efficiency. He's a guy who's shooting the 3 ball at a good level. He's a guy who's finishing at the rim solidly. He's a guy who can give you over 20 points on any given night. He's literally averaging 17 points. He's a huge scoring threat on this team, and he does it without getting in the way of other players. He is forced to come off the bench because Gordon Hayward and Miles Bridges have just been that better. It's not because Kelly Oubre is not good enough to be a starter in the league. He's been great, and he definitely deserves more love, because a lot of people were on his head after he was really disappointing for the Warriors. That's really just how good this team is. They have a guy averaging 17 points while playing good defense coming off of their bench. When you could just put a lineup out with 5 guys on the court who are all guys who are capable of scoring 20 points, that's like a really good offense, we're being honest. All those guys can create their own shot. All those guys have the ability to score at a really good level and shoot the ball at a level. All those guys are spacing the floor. That's just a great team and a hard team to guard. And all those guys can pass the ball decently, probably except Kelly Oubre. He's not a good passer, really. But this is a really talented team, hard team to guard. I didn't even bring up PJ Washington, who's really underrated on this team. He's a solid defender, and on offense, he's a really good shooter. So when they go to their small ball lineup, they could have a lineup of everyone shooting the ball. It's not great defensively, but I don't think it's the worst. It's probably, I don't know, Mason Plumlee's not amazing. But to be honest, yeah, this team is nice on offense. The biggest thing holding this team back right now definitely has to be their defense, because after making of this video, the Hornets are not good on defense at all. They're actually one of the worst defenses in the league. They rank 24th in defensive rating and 28th in opponents' points per game. Simply one of the worst defenses in the league. If they ever really want to be a really good team, they have to either improve their defense to at least just be average, or they're going to have to basically become like the best offense in the league. If all of their guys can reach their potential, maybe they could be one of the best offenses in the league. That's not crazy to think, but I don't think that's happening for the next few years. They definitely have to improve their defense, and I think their biggest weakness isn't their lack of defensive players, because they actually have a lot of really solid and good defenders. Miles Bridges is a versatile defender who I would feel comfortable putting on the opposing team's best perimeter forward. Gordon Hayward's a solid defender due to how smart he is. Kelly Oubre is a really good defender, and I would be honestly fine with him guarding the other best perimeter defender on the team. He's good on the perimeter, athletic, he can make a lot of plays. Terry Rozier, when he gives effort, is really solid on defense, can guard most guards. PJ Washington is more versatile than most centers in the league. He could guard multiple positions better than average. Jalen McDaniels is a pretty versatile defender who could guard multiple positions. Caleb Martin's a pretty solid defender. Overall, this is not a team filled with a bunch of defenders. Even LaMelo Ball, who's not the best defender in the world, but he is a 6'7" point guard, so at times his length does disrupt smaller guards. And honestly, I don't really see a real excuse for this team being as bad on defense as they are. Maybe they could be below average, but being one of the worst is just absolutely disastrous. I feel like a lot of the blame for their offense has to be put on their coach, because the coach has done pretty well with them on offense, but on defense, they definitely need some work, because they just simply have way too much defensive talent to be this bad. Maybe a big problem is Mason Plumlee, who has just been absolutely horrible on offense, and he's not really that amazing on defense. He's not a good perimeter defender. He's lost a lot of athleticism. I know he's doing all these nice dunks, but he's just not blocking as much shots. He's not causing pressure on the rim. People are finishing on him early. I'm not saying he's the worst defensive center in the league, but in pick and roll situations, things like that, he's always getting burned. He's probably an average defender as a center, maybe even below average. And I think that's a big reason their defense has sucked, because he just hasn't been amazing. He's probably been one of the worst starting centers in the league this season. That's probably why all Charlotte Hornets fans want him traded. To be honest, I think if they got a guy like Jarrett Allen on this team, they would be really nice, but obviously he's not going to come. But even a guy like Rashawn Holmes from the Sacramento Kings would make this team way better. To conclude the video, the Charlotte Hornets are a dangerous team just because of the talent they have on their team. They just have so much guys who can go off on any given night, and that's something that I think is really valuable in the NBA, because if you're a team that has multiple guys who can go off, that means your team is not predictable. That makes it really hard to game plan for, and I could see them giving the top teams in the East a stronger fight than most other low seeds. I wouldn't predict them to upset anyone, but they could maybe win a few games in a series against the team that no one thinks they have a chance against. At this point, I think I would predict them to make the playoffs, and I think I would want to see them in the playoffs because they're one of the most fun teams to watch in the league. But at this point, I don't think they're going to be one of the top Eastern Conference teams, which is obvious by their record. I think they'd actually be lucky to get out the first round. And something that's holding them back is their lack of a superstar. LaMelo is probably their best player, and he's an all-star, but he's not close to being a top 10 player in the league. And I think you need a guy like a top 10 to 15 player in the league to even have a chance at a championship, unless you're like the Detroit Pistons in 2004. And they're definitely not the 2004 Pistons, but I think in the future, Charlotte has a really nice young core, young solid roster. They've been making smart moves as of late. They got really lucky. They were not really lucky, but they were smart to not give Kemba that huge contract. Honestly, I think they're a team that can compete with teams like the Bucks, Nets, Heat, and Bulls. But I don't think they would beat them, but I think they could win a game or two off of it. Charlotte's definitely underrated. I think they're one of the better lower seeds in the Eastern Conference.